I'm happy to join you this evening to talk about just climate action. Last year, the International Panel on Climate Change warned that we have only 10 years to take action to turn the tide on global warming before catastrophic disruption results in exacerbating poverty, spreading illness, increasing social unrest, and causing loss of lives and biodiversity. Last year at this time, youth took to the street in over 150 countries, pleading for adults to do something in light of the United Nations Emergency Climate Summit. The Global Day of Protest called on governments to act and act now to advance renewable energy and to end our reliance on fossil fuels. Greta Thunberg led an international movement of protests, and organizations like Extinction Rebellion took to the street using nonviolent means to express the need for urgent climate action. Over the last several months, tens of millions of people have taken to the streets across the United States to protest the deaths of Black citizens at the hands of the police, disproportionate police brutality against people of color, and to advocate for racial justice and equity. The national protests have continued to call on our governments to act and to act now, to defund police forces, eliminate inherent bias in our systems, and provide reparations to those who have suffered under the shadow of our nation's history of enslaving Black people. These two movements are as interconnected as the underlying causes and the impacts of the problems are interconnected. And inevitably, their solutions are also complex and interconnected. There are two lessons to be learned from the global 19 pandemic about taking action to address these social issues. The pandemic has revealed the disparities among the US population that cause people of color to contract COVID-19, becoming severely ill and die from the virus at higher rates. According to the CDC, the mortality rate for African Americans is 2.1 times higher than for white non-Hispanics, and the mortality rate for Latino persons is 1.1 times higher. This is the first lesson. This is caused by what health professionals call the social determinants of health, environmental and social factors that predispose populations to be susceptible to certain illnesses. At UI Health, a 2019 assessment of needs found the following social and structural determinants of health need to be addressed to achieve health equity in the diverse patient populations it serves, including unemployment, education, income, tobacco use, poverty, transportation, food security, housing, and violence. The racial justice movement has elevated the underlying causes of these factors, 400 years of racial discrimination by underfunding education in predominantly non-white schools, redlining, low-wage work, increasing wealth gaps caused by the corporation of America, and unequal access to opportunity that have led to these communities to be exposed to those social determinants. The first lesson is that it's not just when there is a health pandemic that there will be disproportionate impacts. We will see it, we are already seeing it, when the impacts of climate change hit. During the recent hurricanes in the South and the fires in the West, people with less financial resources found it harder to leave their homes under the threat of storm or fire. The air pollution produced by the fire puts people with respiratory preconditions such as asthma at much higher risk of illness and dying. Those communities have higher than average rates of asthma because they are located near industry and power plants that produce air pollution. Children growing up with the increased exposure to chemicals and particulates in the atmosphere are more likely to develop asthma. And members of underinsured communities flooded by hurricanes or rainstorms often lose what equity they had in their homes. They often find themselves living in shelters with hundreds of others in these times of COVID, unable to practice social distancing. According to an analysis by the New York Times, some 162 million people in the US, that's half of the population, will most likely experience a decline in the quality of their environment, namely more heat and less water. For 93 million of them, the changes could be extreme, enough that by 2070, if we don't act to reduce emissions and they rise at extreme levels, at least 4 million Americans would be living on the edge of where it is viable for human life. Since mobility is often related to wealth, many may be left behind. The second lesson from the pandemic is more hopeful. When COVID-19 first began to spread across the US, most states acted quickly to enact measures to slow the tide of the illness, and we quickly changed the way we live and work. The extent to whether these measures were effective, however, is out of the scope of my argument. Today, we made a transition to a different way of living and working. We took collective action for the good of ourselves and the good of others. We proved to ourselves that we can act fast and act now. Perhaps that is also why the protests continue, because we know we are capable of acting fast and making a difference. I work as a director of sustainability at an urban public university at UIC, and I feel that universities should be concerned with the pandemic and racial justice and its connection to climate change, because it is tied to our social mission. For more than 5 decades, researchers in universities and around the world have been studying climate change, and environmentalists have been taking action since the first Earth Day over 50 years ago on April 22nd, 1970. For more than a decade, higher education is built on our missions of education, research, service, and committed to taking action as institutions to become carbon neutral and advance sustainability across the curriculum, in operations, and in the communities in which the colleges and universities reside. In late 2006, the American College and Universities President's Climate Commitment was initiated by presidents of 12 institutions, and they were followed by 336 charter signatory institutions. The University of Illinois, Chicago was among those signatories, committing to tracking and publicly reporting greenhouse gas emissions and to the development of a climate action plan. The host organization, Second Nature, stated that they stand in solidarity with those on the front lines pushing for systemic change, racial equality, and justice across the nation. Because there is no climate justice without social justice, because we know the solutions to both are interconnected. I envision a sustainable campus where space use will be highly efficient, limiting the size of new buildings to really be only as big as needed, renovating UIC's existing buildings to be energy efficient, comfortable, useful, and net zero carbon ready. This means they would be primed to go off natural gas powered heating systems when alternative systems are in place. And the campus can serve as a model for other urban universities and city buildings. I see every flat roof on campus covered in solar panels, powering our campus with green energy. Especially, I'm excited to see the Student Services Building host a solar photovoltaic system that could be accessible by elevator for students of all abilities to come tour and study. In my vision, UIC is also an anchor investor in community solar system that supplies renewable energy to residents and communities we serve near campus, such as Pilsen, Lawndale, and Little Village. These systems are built on buildings or brownfields that are proximal to the communities, and they power and provide affordable energy to the residents. In this carbon-free future, the rest of UIC's grid-supplied electricity comes from a wind or solar farm built in Illinois as a result of UIC's long-term procurement of that power. All these systems are built by a diverse set of local workers trained for the clean energy future who earn living wages. And finally, the campus fleet is all electric and powered by renewable energy, and our community arrives to campus by walking, biking, public transit, or carpooling in electric vehicles. When people walk around campus, they see a healthy tree canopy covering 25% of open space, as well as many rain gardens and bioswales frequented by pollinator-friendly insects and beautiful monarch butterflies every summer. Stormwater is captured by these plants and through permeable pavers in parking lots and plazas and from rooftops of new buildings and recycled back for irrigation. Finally, all of our waste is diverted from landfill and recycled back, Finally, all of our waste is diverted from landfill to composting or recycling, and single-use plastic is no longer seen in food service. Most of these ideas are laid out already in UIC's Climate Action Implementation Plan, and people in planning, operations, and project management are working hard to achieve the goals. As one of the most diverse universities in the country, the work of racial justice, climate action, and environmental justice should be even more intertwined. Sustainability and diversity initiatives should band together to address the common underpinnings of our respective goals. In my vision, every student takes a class that includes sustainability, so students understand that the work of racial justice is also the work of climate justice. There are hundreds of students who work in internships, like the one my office offers, on research projects that are finding solutions. UIC students are thus prepared to go out and make the changes that need to happen. Each student should voice their concerns about what their university is doing on social justice and climate action. Take a class, do an internship, join a student group, advocate campus administration, ask them to act and act now. As our students take to the streets, their advocacy complements UIC's mission to educate, pilot, model, and lead efforts to find solutions to climate change that are racially and socially just.